Hello, my name is Tegan Stamford. This presentation shares my capstone project, which focused on the early planning stage of developing an NGSS aligned inquiry based K 5 science curriculum and Lower School Science Lab at Ravenscroft Independent School. As a second grade teacher and the K2 representative on the Science Curriculum Planning Committee, this project mattered to me both personally and professionally. In my classroom, I see how naturally curious young students are. They ask questions, they want to explore, they want to do experiments, and are eager to figure out how the world works around them. At the same time, I noticed that science often felt rushed or inconsistent in the lower school, largely because of limited time, resources, and clear structures put in place. I care deeply about this change initiative, not only because I want science to feel meaningful, but also because it needs to have a bigger part of the school day and not squeezed in. This capstone allowed me to help shape early planning decisions so that the inquiry based science became a shared school wide priority rather than an individual teacher's burden. Our school's long term goal is to launch an inquiry driven lower school science program in the 2026-2027 school year. During the early planning phase, the Science Committee began developing a K 5 scope and sequence aligned with our Wit and Wisdom ELA curriculum and explored building our very own science curriculum using OpenSciEd as the foundation. My role as the K2 representative was to bring teacher voice and student experience into the planning process. The purpose of my capstone was to support this work by using research, data, and collaboration to guide thoughtful, evidence based discussions and decisions before moving into the implementation phase. Both teacher and student data highlighted a clear need for change. Teacher survey results showed that science instruction was happening inconsistently across grade levels. Many teachers reported limited time, materials, and confidence in leading inquiry based lessons, even though they valued hands on learning experiences. Student interviews reinforced this message as well. Students shared that they rarely did experiments, but when they did, science felt exciting and memorable. Many expressed wanting more opportunities to explore those experiments, to dive deeper and figure things out for themselves. As a teacher, hearing students say they want more science and the why was so very powerful. It confirmed that this work wasn't just about creating a new science curriculum. It was about honoring student curiosity and what they wanted out of it. The research strongly supports what teachers and students were saying. Schmucker emphasizes that effective science learning happens when students actively read and talk and write about ideas, reinforcing that language is the central idea to thinking and understanding. Volkram and Abel argue that science labs should be moving away from that step by step process, those cookbook activities, and towards student driven inquiry where students ask those questions, collect evidence, and explain their thinking. Research on the NGSS alignment also highlights the importance of using structured tools, such as the EQUIP rubric, to fairly and comprehensively evaluate science curricula. Rather than overwhelming the project, this research served as a guide for the committee to help them ensure our planning stayed focused on what truly supports student learning. This project focused on the early planning for a K 5 inquiry based science curriculum and lab, with an emphasis on readiness, alignment, and teacher support. My leadership approach combined transformational and distributed leadership. Transformational leadership supported a shift in how teachers think about science and learning, while distributed leadership ensured that teachers and student voices shaped the planning process and were part of the committee and the decision. It wasn't only from top down. Together, these approaches help build shared ownership and readiness for this change initiative. Over the last 7 weeks, I have collected teacher survey data, conducted student interviews, collaborated with a 3-5 representative to draft an NGSS aligned rubric, and shared findings with the science committee to guide discussions on next steps. One of the primary artifacts for this project was the NGSS aligned curriculum rubric. This rubric allowed the committee to evaluate our open SciEd based scope and sequence using clear, research aligned criteria rather than relying on personal preferences. It helped shift conversations from what simply looked engaging to what truly supported inquiry learning. For me, this is why it was important. This is why it mattered. It gave teachers a shared language and a practical tool to support consistent, high quality science instruction. Equity is also part of this project. Inconsistent science instruction creates inequitable access for students. Inquiry based science supports multiple ways for students to demonstrate their understanding, benefiting multilingual learners and students with learning and attention needs. Technology also supported this planning work through Google Forms, shared Google Docs, and collaborative tools that allowed data and voices to be collected, organized, and shared efficiently. These tools made collaboration easier and possible despite time constraints and ensure transparency throughout the whole process. To understand both teacher readiness and student experiences, I used mixed method evaluation plan. Quantitative data came from a teacher survey that identified patterns in science, frequency, confidence, and perceived supports that they needed. Qualitative data came from student interviews and teachers' written comments, which helped explain the why behind the numbers and brought meaning to the data. In addition, the NGSS aligned rubric allowed the committee to evaluate the curriculum alignment in a structured, evidence based way. Together, these tools reflected the principle that combining qualitative and quantitative data produced stronger insights than relying solely on one method. When the teacher survey, student interviews, and NGS aligned rubric were used together, they gave the science committee a clear picture of current practice and supported more thoughtful, evidence based decisions during this early planning phase. The committee identified clear priorities for revision, built shared understanding across grade levels, and increased teacher readiness for future implementation of this change initiative. Teacher and student feedback made it clear that we need more consistent inquiry based science across K 5. Research reinforced that shift away from the cookbook labs towards more student driven investigations. And the NGSS aligned rubric ensured decisions stayed grounded in evidence rather than personal preferences. One of the most important lessons I learned through this whole project was the value of slowing down during the planning phase. A key challenge was recognizing that this work focused on planning rather than immediate implementation. However, addressing gaps early before launching a new project and program was going to be essential for long term success in this change initiative. As a teacher and emerging leader, this work reinforced my belief that meaningful change begins with shared understanding and thoughtful planning. This capstone represents the first step in a larger effort to ensure that all lower school students at Ravenscroft experience science learning that is curious, hands on, and meaningful. Thank you for listening and for taking the time to review my capstone project and presentation. I hope you have a fantastic day.